Hello, folks. I want to welcome you to VGB's podcast, episode 24. Beep, 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 beep. I am your host, John Warren. Not with me this week is my forever co-host, Niki Grace. Niki is on vacation, and I'm so happy for them. They seem to be having a very good time. Folks, we had originally planned, as we alluded to at the end of last week's episode, to have a 99 Potions reunion. Yes, that's right. To dissect Dragon Age, the Veilguard. As many of you know, the United States just had an election, presidential election, and it did not go well. It didn't go great. That plus a combination of scheduling issues has forced us to postpone that probably for a week, maybe two. So we're still planning on doing it. It's just that we had so many folks kind of drop out for various very good, understandable reasons. Didn't make sense to try to force it with a smaller group that had not played it all that much. So we're going to wait till we have a little bit more played and a little more, let's call it emotional bandwidth to talk about a video game. Real quick, I do actually want to talk about the election and how that went, and maybe I'll put a timestamp in there if you're tired of hearing about it. I don't blame you, and I'll put a timestamp, and you can basically skip ahead to the part where we talk about video games, because it's just me today, baby, just talking right into your ear balls. We will answer Hive questions at the end of the episode. I'll talk to you about some big games news, but for a second, let's talk about the election. Donald Trump kicked Kamala Harris's ass pretty bad. And it didn't shock me the way that 2016 shocked me. And frankly, 2020 kind of shocked me too. I didn't actually think Biden was going to win, but he did. It was not close. It looks like he's going to win the popular vote as a Republican for the first time in 20 years, which is, that's a bitter pill, because his character flaws are so obvious. I don't need to even spend a moment talking about them. He's a disgusting person, one of the worst people who has ever lived. Okay. So I want you to remember that that's the takeaway, is that half the country essentially voted for one of the worst people to have ever lived. But in the cold light of day, so to speak, I think we spent too much time in 2016 being quiet about how bad Hillary Clinton's campaign was. And I think we should cut that part, that period where it felt like it was inexcusable to talk about that. It's just about hating women. Oh, it's just about Russian interference. Just blah, 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 blah. She ran a bad campaign. It was complacent. She gave up on key swing states. It was not good. Kamala Harris's campaign has more glaring and obvious flaws than Hillary Clinton's did. And that's really saying something. Kamala Harris courted the vote of centrist Republicans by campaigning with Liz Cheney and, by proxy, the architect of so much sorrow in the 21st century, Dick Cheney. And what did it get her? She lost a point of the Republican vote. Joe Biden got 6% Republican vote in 2020, and Kamala Harris had 5%. Kamala Harris refused to give any sort of platform to the college students and the organizing bodies that were pushing very hard for the Biden administration, and by extension, Kamala Harris, to address the genocide in Gaza. to address what they might do to actually stop sending weapons over to Bibi Netanyahu, to actually do something aside from just sit here, send weapons over, allow our politicians to sign bombs that are there to eviscerate the women, children, and men of Gaza. Refuse to give them any sort of time or attention, shouted them down at protests, refused to give them time at the Democratic National Convention. It's an embarrassing display. She did not win a single swing state. Democrat voting turnout was down, I think 18 million is the count at this point. Now, this isn't to say that voter suppression and shitty Republican tricks and apathy, these are all things that do contribute to a lack of turnout. But I'm not satisfied anymore by just saying, okay, well, I guess half the country's evil. I don't believe that. I don't. I think it is a horrible act to vote for him. But I do believe, as evidenced by the many, many, many interviews that I've seen conducted over the past 6 months with people on the right, there is a genuine lack of information. And our social media platforms, from Meta to Twitter, they are overrun with right-wing propaganda. And that is by design. And that's something that's very hard to undo without billionaires or regulation. And now the regulation part is probably out the window. And I think it's possible to undo this with some organization, but it is not easy. So I recommend to everyone listening to this, there are reasons to not delete your account on Twitter, but certainly stop using it if you can. Blue Sky is pretty good. It has gotten very good. You can post videos. There are a lot more people there now. A lot of people who you might have been waiting for to make the move. There are some professional wrestlers that are now over there now. Wario64 is posting over there. That's actually one that seems to be kind of a little bit of a canary in a coal mine to a lot of people. Oh, Wario64 started posting there. Maybe it's time. And I think it is time. I think it's time. My recommendation is to try to take power away from these people. Stop using their products. Stop using their things. If you cannot use Amazon for things, I've started to use Amazon a lot less. I'm going to use Twitter a lot less. I think we're going to have to create our own communities and our own moments. But I also think that the call for the community can ring a little hollow to people who really just need actual government systems to work properly. That's what they need. It takes a lot of energy to go out and meet your neighbors, especially if you're a vulnerable person. What we actually really need are institutions to continue to work. So however we can basically stand up in the face of any sort of cuts that might be coming to the government systems, we should take them. I'm very disappointed that Democrats just continue to be okay with getting their asses kicked and being okay with staying in the middle, being okay with taking some of the worst fucking advice from people on how to run a successful campaign. You might be saying this is a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking. This is all stuff that I and others have essentially said the entire time. There was about a 3-week period when Kamala Harris became the nominee And then she got Tim Walz on board a few weeks later. That period of time, it actually felt like it could have worked because Democrats were starting to talk openly about how strange the Republican ticket was. And not just saying like the same song and dance about Donald Trump being a felon. I have to be honest. We've heard it so much, it has lost its meaning. He's done so much wrong, and we talk about it so much that at some point, I think it becomes not very smart to focus on it, which sounds crazy. Because like I said, he's one of the worst people to have ever existed. But at some point, I think people just kind of tune it out. What can you do for them? Can you lower the price of groceries? All that stuff. The reason I think that I don't believe that a lot of people are just evil has to do with conversations I've had in the face of what looks like what looked like a Trump victory this week. I talked to a couple of people on local business asking them, and I believe they're Trump voters. I didn't ask, but they had said some things to me or to their coworkers around me that made me think, okay, this guy's probably a Trump voter. And I asked them about how the tariffs would impact specifically their electronic supply business. Because with tariffs, I'm preaching to the choir. I'm telling you something you know, but I think a lot of people don't know this. With tariffs on imported goods from China, let's say parts or products as a whole, if there's a 60% tariff, that is going to get passed on to the customer. The companies will pay that, and the customer will ultimately foot the bill because the company will raise their prices. So I asked, how is it going to happen? And they said, well, things have been going up since COVID. It doesn't really matter. Well, high quality televisions are roughly the same cost as they used to be with inflation. And they often go on sale, especially ones that aren't maybe 4K, 8K, relatively inexpensive now than they used to be. Same with sound equipment, things like that. So this idea that, costs have just gone up. Well, they really haven't. Not that much, at least. Not for big ticket goods. For a lot of other things, yes. But now we're seeing, yes, consoles are getting more expensive. The Switch 2, which we'll talk about in a bit, was probably always going to be maybe a little more expensive than the Switch. But now the Switch 2 is almost certainly going to be more expensive. Probably drastically more expensive. And I had asked about this because I was like, well, think about it. If the only people who can afford big box electronics are the top 5% in this country, then what happens to your clientele and what happens to your prices when you go to that clientele? And why would they use you instead of someone else? And they didn't really have a good answer for me. They just said, well, it's been going up, so that's fine. But we're not talking about 60%, 100%, 200% increases during COVID. That's not what we're talking about. So I really don't think a lot of people understand. One of those byproducts that will happen with the tariffs is that businesses between now and February will probably buy as much product as they can from China so they can basically stockpile it in order to not pay the tariffs when and if they are implemented. And therefore, those businesses will probably hold back bonuses and raises and things like that as they spend more on inventory now in order to save money on those tariffs later. So a lot of people who might have voted for this because they think that tariffs will somehow lower the grocery prices are about to get a swift kick in the pants. And I see a lot of people say the phrase, leopards eating faces. This leopard won't eat my face. And I actually don't relish in this. I really don't. Maybe that makes me a weirdo, but I actually don't think it's cool for huge swaths of the population to be so drastically let down by information and so insular. And I don't think that insular quality is inherited. I think it is a byproduct of the way this country is, the way that the government does fail so many people. It makes people reasonably skeptical about how the government works. And therefore, it thrusts some people into the idea of like, okay, well, this guy's just bucking the system. I can ignore all the other shit as long as the system gets fucked. And if the system gets fucked, then maybe my life will be better. Because I'll be honest, on the left, there's actually a lot of that too. There are systems that I wish would get fucked and it would make our lives better. But those systems have to do with massive government subsidies for billionaires. Like these are systems that are they need to be dismantled. We have to start breaking up big businesses again. We have to start doing massive regulation. We have to prevent Elon Musk for creating an unbelievable power center for he and his buddies. We could have stopped most of that at any point. We really could have. But we didn't. Because in this way, and I know people are tired of hearing it said in some way, but in this way, I do think Republicans and Democrats are basically exactly alike. Is that they actually really do like billionaires. They think it is a symbol of American success. And I don't feel like that. I think it's disgusting, just like Bernie Sanders does. And Bernie, to his credit, has spent the past few weeks before the election going on right-wing podcasts talking about economic hardship in a plain way that Kamala Harris wasn't even doing. It came out earlier this week that Tim Walz had basically been stopped from being a bit more fiery and a bit more forward about understanding economic hardship. I guess the Democrats didn't want people associating the economic hardship with their own campaign and their own governance. But guess what? If people are pissed off about the last 4 years, it makes sense to say, here's how we're going to do things differently. And I'm sorry that Joe Biden failed you in this way. And they refused to do it. Would have been the easiest thing to do to say, we understand the last 4 years was not great. Here's how it'll get better. But instead, when asked, Kamala Harris said she would basically change nothing about the way things have gone. Anyway, I know a lot of people are scared and sad, and you should be. I think you should be to some extent. I do think you should be. But I also believe that, one, all we have are each other, right? And also creating things and sharing things is a form of power. So when you start to shore up your own private security at home, which you should do, you should get a nice VPN that doesn't keep super clear logs. You should start backing up your media. You should start hoarding physical media if you can. Don't get rid of the physical media that you have. You should do all that stuff and be very vigilant and be very aware of how weird things might get with just people in your neighborhood, people in your orbit might get more comfortable being absolute pieces of shit for the next little while. But that's not going to be forever, because we're going to have each other's backs. And when these fucking chuds get slapped in the face once, it'll make a difference. So, but I want you to remember that we have each other's backs. Creation is important. And also, if you're like me and you were kind of energized by this, I think that's a good thing. I'm not energized in a way that's happiness. It's so not it. But it's it feels like maybe a call to action, and I'm sad and remorseful that it took this for that to happen. But I'm looking into running for Congress here in the 25th or the 12th congressional district here in Texas. That's kind of how I'm looking at this and saying, okay, I think it's time. I think it's time to start talking to people around me and figuring out how I can make their lives better, even if I disagree with them. But Democrats gave up way too much ground. They started making videos and ads about, oh, well, boys and girls sports, that's not really what we want either. Instead of actually saying, actually fuck off about this stuff. These trans kids don't impact your life at all. They don't. Instead of saying, well, it's the rule of law that we have to take care of these trans people. No, say trans people deserve life-affirming care just like every single American does. Why aren't we more excited about immigration? Aren't we a country of immigrants? Why wouldn't we make it easy for people to come here and while they're getting their citizenship, have a place that is safe and allows them to thrive? Why do we want something different than that? And if people don't want that, why don't they want that? Some people really are just dyed-in-the-wool racists. And we got to just stamp that out. But I think some people, they fundamentally don't understand their options. They don't understand a lot of the consequences that occur from this because partially the government and the media has done such a good job of failing to inform us. They care much more about entertainment than information. They care much more about controlling the narrative instead of actually giving us the truth. So I really do believe a lot of people are victims. They've been victimized by the government. They've been victimized by this media complex. And then some people are just evil. But it's not 50% of the country. I'm sure of that. It's a bad act, but I don't think everyone that does this is a bad person. I've met too many people who just know nothing about how anything works that also vote. And maybe that's a crime in and of itself. And we can talk about that. But obviously people did not like the Biden presidency. And I understand why. And Kamala Harris decided to run one of the worst campaigns I've ever seen. So there you have it. Part of the reason I know that we ended up with a bad president is because it's because Zelnick, Mr. Zelnick, Strauss Zelnick over at Take-Two Interactive not only completed the sale of Private Division for parts because the games weren't big enough, but also is very excited that Donald Trump was elected president because it might lead to an FTC that is not quite so interested in regulating the unchecked, mostly unchecked consolidation of the video games industry. Zelnick said in an interview with Variety, quote, "I believe in the democratic process by all accounts. This is a free, fair, and secure election. The future is also just that. So we always have that time together as a nation and as a company. We're an entertainment company, not a politics company. We're focused on our mission. I think that the president-elect has made it very plain that he believes in reducing regulation. I do believe that the FTC was misguided during President Biden's term, and I do think the FTC tried to impede some transactions that were beneficial for both the companies in question and the economy at large, and the FTC lost all those cases since. So I do think that, depending on what the specific topic is, deregulation can be a positive, and I am certainly looking forward to more sensible FTC. Oh, geez, Strauss. Way to be an entertainment company and not a politics company, mister. I think deregulation can be positive. He's talking, of course, about Lena Khan, who has actually been a pretty good FTC chair. She has been good at implementing some solutions to problems. She spearheaded the change where you've got to make it as easy to cancel a subscription as it is to start a subscription. I love that. It's too hard to cancel stuff. There were mergers that she stopped. I agree that the case brought against the Microsoft Activision merger was a bad one. It was a very bad one. It was a very bad case. They were right. I think they were right to bring it, but they brought it for mostly the wrong reasons. They focused way too much on cloud gaming and some other bullshit that probably lost them the case. But I think overall, the FTC did a pretty good job during Biden's administration. In fact, I think it might have been one of the only bright spots during the Biden administration. And that was, a good thing. And now, of course, it'll change. And Strauss Zelnick is very happy. If Strauss Zelnick is very happy, you probably know that things are not going super well. Anyway, the thing with getting rid of private division is that the quotes are really strange. I mean, so far as that transaction, quote unquote, the buyer purchased substantially all private division's existing and unreleased titles. Blah, 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 blah. Importantly, we're grateful to the contributions that the private division team made to Take-Two, and we're confident that they'll continue to achieve success. And kind of going on to say, like, basically they just didn't make stuff big enough. Which is funny because it's just like you're shifting your business strategy, but you're making it sound like it was a mistake or something. Oh, well, they just started focusing. Like, they could focus on whatever you want them to. They could be a support studio for one of the massive undertakings that you make, but no, you're just like, I don't make stuff that's big enough. Anyway, let's get rid of them. Funnily enough, maybe the most important gaming news of the week dropped in the middle of the election, while a bunch of polls were closing. I think all the 8 p.m. Central polls were closing at around the time an investor brief from Nintendo confirmed that the successor to the Nintendo Switch will be unveiled sometime before the end of March of 2025, which is pretty much in line with what a lot of folks have been saying. We expect something like January or whatever. But the Switch 2, it's not called the Switch 2 officially. It probably won't be. But it will be backwards compatible with existing Nintendo Switch software. Now, this is something that I think we expected, right? I think we totally expected this. The Nintendo Switch Online store will be available to the successor. The Nintendo Switch Online system will be available on the successor. And Nintendo Switch software will be compatible with the successor. So it's a good thing. Obviously, it's an expected thing, but It's still a good thing to have announced and confirmed. And I think this is the most plainly we have really heard them talk about anything with the Switch 2. And yeah, I fully expect that, either around the time of the Game Awards or in mid-January or so, we'll probably get our big reveal of the Switch 2. I don't know how it'll work. I mean, I'm assuming basically that once you log in with your Switch ID and all of that stuff, your Nintendo ID, you'll be able to just grab the stuff that you've already purchased off of the store. The big burning question that we don't have an answer to yet is, will any of that compatible software get any sort of boost, get any sort of frame rate or resolution boost? We just don't know the answer to that. It would be nice if games like Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and even things like Echoes of Wisdom, it'd be nice if those things ran better. It'd be nice if the Pokemon games on Switch ran better on the Nintendo Switch 2, but we, of course, don't know the answer to this, and we probably won't until sometime early next year. All right, so what have I been playing? I have been playing Dragon Age, the Veilguard. I'll talk about it very briefly here, and we'll get into it deeper when we ultimately do our 99 Potions reunion / deep dive. But I am enjoying my time. I am. I think it's a good game. I think it's a fun. It's a fun action role playing game. I think any sort of indication that you might have gotten from someone that says this is kind of a return to form for BioWare, I think that is overstated. And not only do I think it's overstated, I think it's ahistorical. As you were really not getting the depth of character interaction and world building that you're getting from older BioWare titles. And that might be okay for some of you. Okay, I want to kind of get to the action. I don't need to go super deep into this. And I'll talk about specifics on our actual deep dive episode. But for me, it's just not scratching a lot of the itches that something like Fallout New Vegas is able to scratch. Something like Baldur's Gate 3 is able to scratch. It's just not as kind of modular and interesting as those games. And BioWare was never actually quite that modular, but I feel like it did a little bit more in the past than it's doing with the Veilguard. I also have big issues with the Solus storyline, but again, I think we can get into that on a deeper dive. I like this game. I'm having fun with it. Creating your Rook is a lot of fun. Creating your Inquisitor from scratch is a little bit less fun when you don't totally remember what your Inquisitor looked like. I could have probably popped it in and played it and gotten a reminder, but I had to kind of operate from memory on that one. But it's a good one. So if you have a hankering for a kind of a Western style RPG that is definitely more on the action side than on the strategy side, I do think Dragon Age: The Veilguard is very good. It is one of the better games that I've played this year. But a game that I think I like a little bit more is Metaphor ReFantazio, which has been out for quite a while. A lot of people like it. But I had not really been able to get my hands on it until this week, and I do like this game quite a bit. It's got all of the slick UX graphic flair of a Persona, but it is very much more in the style of a Final Fantasy. It really is kind of like Atlas decided, hey, let's just make one of those Final Fantasy games, since Square seems maybe a little bit disinterested in kind of returning to the roots of what Final Fantasy is. Let's maybe step in and make one of these. And I think they've done actually a very, very good job. I really like this game so far. I'm not very far in, but I'm really enjoying my time. And I really expected a lot of the praise that this game has gotten for being kind of politically savvy and smart and really interesting. I thought that stuff was overstated. I really expected to go into this thing finding something that's a little milquetoast and half baked and all that stuff. It's not subtle, but I think so far it's actually very interesting. I do think it has some interesting things to say about dissent and about resistance and about politics and about leadership. I actually do think it is pretty well done. I was expecting to be one of those cynics that goes, come on now, this is not that great. But so far so good. I think it's actually pretty interesting. So if you're interested in a turn-based RPG, especially something from Atlas, maybe if you've like been interested in Atlas games but don't really kind of vibe with Persona or kind of the mercurial nature of the Shin Megami Tensei games, this might be a really good one to pick up. I do think it is going to get tough on my eyes after a while because there's just so much that goes on, especially in like town screens where there's just a lot of like dialogue boxes kind of popping up all the time. But I do think this game is very, very good. I think you should check it out. Yeah, I've been really enjoying my time. Astro Bot. Okay, I'm really late to this party, but having kind of missed the window without my consoles during the move, I started playing it this past week. This game is a banger, just a stone cold banger. It really is like Sony game team Asobi a lot of money and said, hey, go make a Mario. And it's really good. It's really, really, really good. I am so impressed with the themes of these levels. I think the technology, I mean, this is where kind of that Ratchet and Clank immediate warping stuff. Astro Bot does a lot of that stuff in more subtle ways and very surprising ways. Astro Bot is great. Absolute game of the year contender, and something I'm going to be thinking about for a long time. And I can see it as something that I decide to replay, like a Mario game. I do replay Mario Odyssey almost every single year. And I can see myself going back because I think this game is really strong. I am still going back to that point about cynicism. I am still not a big fan of completely building a world around the PlayStation 5's architecture and Sony's historical characters. Like, I think building an entire world out of that is a little corny, a little craven, a little boring. I don't find it to be this kind of like great celebration of everything. I think Mario games, especially Odyssey, did a better job of kind of paying homage to its own history in a way that it kind of respected itself a little bit more than I feel like the Astro Bot PlayStation 5 is just everything kind of vibe. But when the game's not doing that stuff, it's really special. And I really, really, really like this game. So can't wait to finish that up. I'll probably finish it up this weekend. But boy, that's a real treat, and I'm really glad that I finally got to get my hands on it. Okay, and since I am running solo here, let's talk about Marvel Snap. I'm playing a lot of Marvel Snap lately. November season just started, and it is a Thor / kind of Asgard world themed month. So in the season pass, you get Surtur, which is a really good card. When you play another card, like if you play Surtur, which is a three energy card, it's only got, I think, 5 power. Yeah. When you play a card with 10 plus power, Surtur gains +3. So there are combinations of cards that you can do. Like I like essentially Zabu is the little tiger guy that makes all 4 cards in your deck actually cost 3. I love playing him. And then there are like a few 10 power 3 cards, then a few 10 power 5 cards, and then, a few 10 power 6 cards. So it's a really good kind of setup. Like if you get Searcher early, like early enough to play it at that 3, then you've got, 3 to 4 turns, depending on if magic is in play. You got 3 or 4 turns to essentially keep boosting Searcher by +3, +3, +3. So you can really get that up to like +9, +12 in some respects. It's a really, really good card. I'm having a lot of fun with it. I'm actually having a lot of success with it. I'm winning a lot more games than I'm losing with Surtur. My Surtur deck is really cool. Frigga is another card that that just came out. I got it in the collector spotlight key or whatever thing that you can do, and that is a 3/3 card on reveal. You basically add a copy of the last card you played to your hand. I think this card would be really powerful if it played straight onto the game. I think it should go directly in play. After playing a few rounds with Frigga with a deck, I don't think this card is powerful enough. I think it's probably going to get a buff either with power or being able to just play one of those cards directly, because if you play it early, you're probably not playing anything very powerful. And if you play it late, then you may be playing it. So there's really only like 1 or 2 turns where it's going to be beneficial to you, like, at all. And then there's some spoilery stuff. So King Atri, that's going to be unreleased relatively soon. This is from a data mine. The activation, this is from, by the way, from snap.fan. I did not source this information myself. I knew about Frigga and Surtur because I've been playing the game, but this stuff has not been released yet. King Atri is coming up. You'll be able to draw a card that didn't start in your deck. So that's just like drawing a card and putting it in your hand, that it's not in your deck. So it's just like kind of random. So I can see that being fairly useful. And it's a low cost. It's 1 cost, 2 power. So that's kind of cool. Later this month, we got Malekith, which on reveal, you're going to add a 1, 2, or 3 cost card from your deck where Malekith is played, and it reveals at the end of the game. So it kind of adds an element of surprise. But I can definitely see if you build your deck right, you'll be able to really know what card that's probably going to be, and maybe create some powerful combinations there. It's a 4 power. I mean, it's a 4 cost, 6 power card, so it's pretty good. And Fenris Wolf is going to resurrect the highest power discarded or destroyed enemy card to your side of this location. That's an activate, so that's kind of one of those new things. So you can decide when to activate it, and it's a 2 cost, 3 power card. So that's kind of a cool one. And then Gore the God Butcher is a 6 cost and -1 power card, except it's got an ongoing power, so +2 power for each on reveal card that is currently in play. So there's some pretty good combinations there. If you fill your deck with cards that are mostly on reveal, that's going to be a pretty powerful play at the end of the game. So listen, I'm the Marvel Snap sicko. This has been something that I've played a lot of over the past couple months, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm playing a lot more than I am Balatro on mobile, and it's just a great game. If you haven't played it, if you're into like early Hearthstone, like the way I was, it just scratches that itch so hard, and much faster, which is a lot of fun and important for me. Okay, we have Hive questions. Of course, you can go to vgbs.com/join and join the Hive. And every single week, you get to ask us questions and we get to answer them, which is so exciting. Our first question this week comes from My Hero Zero. Thank you so much. What's worse, will listening to someone explain a dream they had or explain their roguelike build? Which is a very funny question. I think having a dream explained to you is so taxing. It is so taxing. However, if it's really scary, I actually really like hearing about someone's dream. Like if someone is like, I had the scariest dream, I want to know what their dream was like and why it was so scary to them. Like that's really exciting to me. And sometimes it's stuff like, oh, what, really? Wow, I have way scarier dreams. Like that's how I feel. And then sometimes it's like, that is the most horrifying and harrowing thing I've ever heard. And boy, I'm really glad that I didn't dream that. So I think most of the time I'd rather have someone explain a dream if it's scary. Because having someone explain a roguelike build, it's like, oh boy, okay, yeah, plus 0.5 to fucking ice damage. Who cares? Yeah, it's pretty annoying. If it's a real sicko combination, like standing totally still Vampire Survivors kind of situation, like, yeah, I'm into that. But it's like, it's kind of got to be the extreme on either side. Really fucked up dream or really weird roguelike build. Otherwise, I'm like, man, just fucking skip it, dude. Papa Bear Zach, thank you so much for this question. Hey, what's Nintendo doing anyway? Good question. So we talked about the Nintendo Switch information. What are they doing? I believe, to me, with Alarmo, with Nintendo Music, with the kind of odd announce in advance additions to Switch Online, which are really not that interesting. I mean, I think you should be able to just kind of stealth drop a lot of these things and get excited about them, especially like Banjo-Tooie, announcing that like 10 days before it came out. Like, I'm not going to set my clock to that. When you announce it, have it be available. I would have stayed up all night playing that thing then, but now I've forgotten that it fucking existed. So Nintendo's odd. But I do think they are gearing up for this announcement. They're winding down the kind of major Switch content that has been announced. Like, we really don't have a whole lot to go on beyond the Mario Luigi Brothership. Like, we just don't know about much beyond that, right? So I think it is interesting that we know so little about their slate, but I think that means it's probably deeply connected to a future where there is a lot of stuff that is going to be exclusive to Switch 2. And that there are going to be a large library of things built into the Switch 2's ecosystem, I believe, will look better, feel better on the Switch 2. I think it would be a massive failure if Tears of the Kingdom did not run better, look better, feel better on the Switch 2. I think that would be a massive, massive mistake. Abyssal Dition asks a question that's gonna require a bit of an explanation, but they ask, would it be useful if the ESRB or some other consumer group tried to more formally distinguish early access releases? And they went on to explain, I think I'm asking if it's reasonable to expect someone to be able to differentiate an early access release that's an active development changing week to week or whatever compared to more established AAA type release that includes a beta that you would call more representative of the finished product. So I the ESRB, I don't really give a shit about the ESRB. I think I would rather see platform holders band together to essentially require a distinction to be made, because I do think there is a difference, right? Like, if you're just getting something labeled early access, it actually really doesn't explain what that is. I mean, you could go deep into the minds and all that stuff, but really, if you're making it a consumer decision, you want to make it relatively quickly on a storefront, it should be pretty clear whether you're getting something that is kind of representative of final product, like a Hades 2, something that is essentially what you're going to get, except it just might have more attached to it, versus like an online product or something that is like extremely early access that's going to change drastically from the time that you get it to the time that it comes out. Yeah, I mean, I think like it's the difference between like buying into a property like before you even break ground, essentially, or buying onto a property before the last room of the house has been built, right? Like, if you know how the rest of the house is, then there are really probably no surprises with that, what that final room is going to look like and feel like, right? But if someone says, here are the blueprints for this thing, you don't know what the builder is going to build. You don't know. And you could get halfway through it and just, figure out that the builders decided to go in a totally different direction. And then you got something that you didn't expect. And maybe that's a good thing, but maybe it's a bad thing. But so I do think it would be interesting if Steam or whatever, mostly Steam, because I think that's really the only kind of platform that clearly allows unfinished stuff to just go up. I think it'd be nice if they made a distinction. I think it'd be nice if they said, hey, this is basically early access A versus early access B, whatever you want to call it. This is essentially a finished product, but we're still tightening stuff up and adding some things. Or this is super not a finished product. We're going to take your feedback, not just your testing information, but your feedback and your ideas, and we're going to build this thing while you're paying for it. Those are two different things, and for them to kind of exist under the early access label is probably actually a fairly odd consumer protection risk. It is something that is a little silly to just kind of say, okay, all these things are basically equal, when they're not. They're really not. Fortunately, knock on wood, I am not personally aware. I'm sure it's out there, but I'm not personally aware of an early access game that has just been an obvious kind of grift. If you know of one, let me know. Go to our Discord and talk to me about it. But as far as I know, well, except for, I guess I'm thinking of Steam specifically. I mean, I guess Star Citizen is a little bit of that, right? I know some people would say, no, you got your money's worth. That's fine. But that one seems to be a little bit of a different situation of people buying into that and being like, yeah, what the fuck am I getting? And when am I getting it? That one seems to be a little bit different, but it's not through Steam. So yeah, I think I answered your question. If I didn't, let me know. We have one final question this week. Jason asks, what's the next big thing that every single indie that comes out a couple of years from now is going to do? Last while, we've had roguelites, deck builders, Metroidvanias about depression, and a pretty recently pop of tactical strategy games. Yeah, I don't think the tactical strategy game phase is over. I think we're going to get sports adjacent games. Now, I don't mean games about sports, but I mean games that create a facsimile of a sport in a unique way, a little bit like Pyre did. I think sports are a rich vein that we are only starting to see a couple of studios kind of scratch the surface of. There are a lot of really interesting role-playing and team-building devices that you could really build into a sports game. And I think there are sports adjacent ideas that have not been explored yet. So I'm not talking about like, oh, that's a new football game out. I mean like a fantasy game that involves playing a game that's like football. This is something I kind of expect to see. I expect to see this. I could also say, we're going to see a PS1 a low poly RPG renaissance, because I feel like we've seen kind of the survival horror PS1 graphics renaissance, but we haven't really seen like an RPG one yet. I think that might be coming. But I think the sports one's maybe a little bit of a wilder bet, and one that I'm kind of more interested in seeing riffs on. And those are our Hive questions. Once again, you go to vgbs.com/join the Hive right now. And you'll be able to ask us questions in the Hive category under the Hive content channel. And we, of course, appreciate your support. Listen, independent media is really the only thing going right now. Kotaku just had a big time, well, that's interesting. Sorry, I got a duplicate text from a DoorDasher. Fascinating. Sorry. We ordered DoorDash earlier, like hours ago, and we got a duplicate text. I thought it was a separate DoorDash earlier order that my wife had made, but it wasn't. Anyway, what was I talking about? Independent media. It's basically all we got. Kotaku just had a couple of layoffs this week. Essentially, management, as far as I understand it, management required a few of these newer workers to work on very specific products and forms of articles. And guess what? They didn't do well because the management team doesn't know what they're fucking doing. And then when it didn't go well, they decided that it was time to let these people go instead of maybe assigning them to shit that would work. So independent media is pretty much all we got, aside from the big few. Alyssa Mercante also left Kotaku on her own devices, not as part of that layoff. So be very interesting to see what she gets up to. Kotaku did not protect her to the extent that they should have through all of the kind of Gamergate 2.0 or whatever you want to call it bullshit. And I don't know if that impacted her decision to leave. I've not talked to her about it, but whatever she gets up to next, I hope it's cool. I bet it will be, and maybe we'll have her on the show sometime. That'd be good. All right, I'm gonna get out of here, folks. I'm gonna get back to doing what I can do around me locally. Let's take care of each other. I know we've kind of gotten really far away on an institutional level from wanting to take care of each other, but I still believe in it. I still believe that it's the path forward, and I still believe in the inherent goodness of people, even in the face of such devastating disappointment. And maybe I'm an idiot, but I don't really care. Normal episode next week, I believe. Might do the 99 potions in a couple weeks. I think Niki's missing the episode after next as well, so that might be a good time to do that. But I will let everyone know on the Discord what we're going to do. And until next time, keep on buzzing, everyone. Bye.